Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we will create a very nice autumn piece, autumn landscape, and for this piece I will be using a palette knife with some soft tips. I'm using two palette knives with two soft tips. If you don't have a soft tip, this is not a problem at all. You don't really need them. And if you don't have a palette knife, well, I highly recommend you to use a palette knife, but if you don't have one, you can use a cotton swab instead, or your fingers, or any other things you use for blending. So when we first look at the reference, we decide where should the shapes go. So my first lines are all messy. I'm just trying to find where this shore will go. And I don't have the go to completely copy the reference. And I decided I want to focus on the water more and less on the ground. So I'm making the foreground a little bit smaller. I'm also roughly putting the line of the horizon there. And remember, don't put your horizon in the middle of the picture because it makes the picture look boring. So always aim for your upper third or your lower third, as so basic rule, I'd say. And of course, I also have to say that this tutorial will be cut, so I just cut it out some parts where I repeatedly do the same things. So if you feel that you need a little bit more time with your piece, just pause this video and then continue when you feel that you're ready for the next step. And back to the tutorial. When I'm done with the horizon line, I add the trees, and also I'm trying not to make them completely straight as I show in the video. I'm trying to add some shape to it so that we have some interesting volumes in the end. Here I start drawing the nice tree which we see in the reference, but then I realized that this tree is kind of cutting my picture in half diagonally, and I don't like that because it creates parts which have the same size on the left and on the right from the tree. So instead I decide to move the tree to the left to make this size on the left side a little bit smaller and give more volume on the right side of the tree. Remember, the reference is not a rule. You are an artist and you can move things from the reference. You can also ignore some things from the reference. You don't have to draw everything you see, and you don't have to draw the things exactly the way you see them, because our goal here is to create a nice picture. Okay, so now I start layering the first color, the cold gray for the water. And if you don't have a big set of oil pastels, it's not a problem. Of course, drawing with a big set is always easier because you already have a lot of colors pre-mixed, but trust me, even with a small set, you can create a lot of beautiful colors. Like here, the color I'm using, you can totally mix it by just using black, white, and some blue. And I will demonstrate it to you. So if you have an option of buying a bigger oil pastel set, you should definitely do that. But if you don't have an interest in having a big oil pastel set, or if you just don't have the possibility to have more oil pastels at the moment, don't get discouraged. Keep on doing art and work with what you have. It's also great practice. So here I am mixing black, white, and some blue to get this nice cold grayish tone which I have on the right side of the picture. And while I do that, I want to remind you that we are drawing water here, and when we draw water, what we remember is the water which is closer to us, closer to the shore, is always darker, and the water which is more far away from us is lighter because it has more reflection. We see more of the reflection on this water. And here you can see I'm blending this black and white and blue, and some of the oil pastel is collecting on my palette knife, and I'm not throwing it away. I'm putting it back on my illustration because we are not wasting oil pastels here. Everything can be used, so I'm always collecting this tiny pieces of oil pastels from my palette knives and just gently mixing them back to the picture. And here the hue is almost the same, but I think it should be a little bit lighter, a little bit bluer. And if you have a small pastel set, just look at your reference and try to find the correct color with what you have. It's actually great practice which will help you understand the color better, because you can work with a very, very, very small amount of color, and having a bigger set of oil pastels just saves you some time, but it's definitely not the key to great art. The key is your skill and your will to create great art. So I am filling the space of the water. As I said before, the water gets a little bit darker, closer to the shore. So I'm adding a little bit of blue here, a little bit of dark blue. I somehow see a little bit of greenish, yellowish in there as well. I can't really explain that, I just see that, and I invite you to take a closer look at this reference or any other reference you'll be working with, and just try to find some subtle colors in there. I mean, the main color should still be recognizable. In our case, it's this gray blue kind of thing, but it can have nice undertones. I'm also blending very roughly. I'm not trying to follow one direction. And when I'm done with blending, I'm adding more white on the top to highlight this light on the horizon. As you can see, I'm not really trying to keep my palette knife very clean here, because I know there will be a lot of blending, and I'm blending in all kinds of directions, up and to the bottom and diagonally. It just looks more interesting, I think, when you blend, because there's a little kind of texture there when you blend, and I think it's beautiful when you keep that texture. So when we are done with the water, I decide to add the foreground first, because the background will be really misty, really soft and light. And at this moment, I'm not sure how dark it should be, and to understand that, I need to see how dark my foreground will be. So I start with this part, and when the trees in the foreground, when everything is done, I can add the background and find the right value for it. Here I've added my first layer of the foreground, and I've immediately realized that my water is still way too dark. So I'm just adding more, well, it's not white, more light gray on top. You can add white with a hint of black and a hint of blue if you like. And also don't try to make those strokes beautiful, because it will all be blended in the end. I'm just leaving this spot next to the shore empty because it is darker than the other parts, as we have already said. Here I am using this softer tip, but if you don't have one, it's not a problem. You can just blend with your palette knife. Just make sure to not press too hard, or you can use this thing. You see the picture now. I have no idea what this is called. If you know what this is called, please write in the comments. But I know you can find these in makeup, like shadow palettes. And I think you can also buy them separately. And I think they are a great solution if you don't have such soft tips for your palette knives. Here I blend a little bit more, making my water look nice and light. My cats are very excited behind the scenes. Every time I blend, they think that I'm trying to play with them. The one in the upper corner is Miso, by the way. She always watched me do art, and I absolutely love it. Okay, now when the water is done, I add some foreground. And I know it looks kind of just brown on the picture, but there are some leaves lying there. And remember, we don't want to draw every detail, every single leaf, because if you aim for realistic art, you have to understand how the human eye works. We never see every leaf and every detail in the nature around us. We mostly see shapes and volumes. Like if you look at the tree, you see that it is green and kind of roundish. And then you see maybe a few leaves, and your brain realizes, okay, that's a tree with a lot of leaves. So when we make art, we have to kind of simulate the same feeling that we give a surface which is filled with orange here, because we want to draw some autumn leaves. And we just fill this surface with orange, and then we smudge, and then we just tip a little bit on the top to kind of notify the viewer there are some leaves, and the people will definitely understand that. But if you start drawing every leaf separately, it will look very unnatural. Here I'm blending all those colors into the shore. I'm also making it a little bit darker because it looks a little bit darker on the reference, and I'm blending in every kind of direction so that nice texture kind of starts popping out. As you can see, I'm pressing pretty hard, so sometimes I even scratch through the oil pastels, and I like it because it creates more depth to the color. And then I'm layering a little bit more dark there to the corners. And this is actually just the way you work with oil pastels. You add, and then you smudge, and then you add a little bit more, and then you smudge again, and then maybe you scratch something off. It's all about balance and trying to find this right vibe, you know. Here I'm trying to create this part with the leaves without giving it too much detail. I'm using the soft tip because I want some of my strokes to be visible. And now I feel like I am ready to go to start drawing the background. And I start by adding a gray undertone because this background will be a little bit more cold because it is far away from us. As you know, this is how the air perspective works. The things in the background look more cold, they look more blue, and they look more light, because between our eyes and the background there is a huge amount of air, which changes the perception of color for us. So after I've added this gray undertone for the background, I realized immediately that my water is still too dark. So I've added even more white to it and just blended it softly, connecting these new white layers with the rest of the water. Okay, now the undertone for the background is done, so I'm adding the same colors I've used on the foreground, same greenish tones and brown tones, but not as much as I used before, because they have to be very subtle, yeah? And if you don't have the exact tones I use, it's really not a problem. For example, I want to add some green, so I use my olive green. But if you have some kind of other green, like the one I'm showing now, a lighter and more vibrant green, use this one. Like, find a way to create a picture with what you have, because it is possible. And don't get discouraged if you don't have the exact same colors I do, because you will probably never have the exact same colors other people do, and it doesn't mean that you can't create the same picture, you know? I mean, at least the same picture in your style with your hands. Here I am adding also these colors to the reflection, because we should not forget the reflection. And since the reflection is always darker than the reflected object, I am adding more darker tones to the reflection, less of those bright orange and greens and more of darker browns. And when I'm done, I start smudging. And here I smudge from top to bottom to kind of imitate the way the trees are growing, but I'm also making some movement to the right and to the left, because if I only smudge from top to bottom, it will look like a fence, and we don't need that. And look how easy and how fast these few strokes start looking like a whole forest. I mean, isn't it magic? I absolutely love this result. Now we only need to add some darker shades close to the horizon line, because you know, at the bottom where the trees are standing, there is not so much light, so the colors are getting darker. And we have to, of course, highlight that. So I'm adding a loose stroke of darker brown. And here I'm smudging very carefully because I want to show that these darker parts are only at the horizon. They are not at the top of the tree, because if we add too much dark at the top, the trees will lose that airy feeling to it. Here, just a few smudging movements. And I'm actually very happy with how these trees look. Now I'd love to add more details, meaning some trees which are shorter or taller. To do so, I use a white oil pastel stick because I don't want them to look like a line, a straight line. There are always some trees which look a little bit different. But make sure that you don't start drawing every single tree. So you have to keep the shape which you decided to have at the beginning of your drawing, and then just add a little bit of spice to it. And also don't forget to add the same amount of detail to your reflection, maybe even a little bit less, because the reflection is mostly less detailed than the object itself. And here I started to correct the reflection with white stick at first, and then I realized it's a little bit too light since the reflection is always darker than the reflected object. So I switched to the light gray stick. You can use white and then just add a very, very tiny amount of black and blue to it and smudge a bit. Also, don't leave those strokes unsmudged. Every time I create a pastel, oil pastel drawing, I smudge everything. Like, it doesn't mean that everything has to have the same amount of, I don't know, smudginess, yeah. But at least it has to be combined with your previous work, because if you add some strokes and don't touch them at all, they'll be very, very visible, very textured, and I think this will kind of ruin the illustration, because they'll just pop off. I mean, you can use it as a special effect, but here I don't need such special effects in the sky, so I'm making sure that everything is blending together nicely. Here I decided to add some more texture, some more interesting details. As on the reference I see something on the bottom, but I will definitely not draw any stones or things, just a little bit of chaos by smudging, and that's enough. And now it's time to draw the trees, and before I add black trees, I scratch a little bit of the pastel, oil pastel, off my painting, because otherwise it will be hard to add black. And also don't hold your pastel, your knife. Jesus Christ, how is this called? Your palette knife. Yeah, right. Don't hold your palette knife like this, like a pan, because if you do so, your lines will be very controlled, and we don't want to have too controlled lines in there. Trees grow the way they do, and if you start drawing a tree with controlled lines, it will just look unnatural. So instead, just hold your palette knife and your oil pastel stick very loosely. For example, here I'm also rotating my oil pastel stick a bit so that I have no control over the line at all. And now I'm peeling off some of the paper to make sure that I can put my oil pastel stick on the side a bit to get those really neat tiny lines. This is also a common mistake to draw a tree and to make the branches too thick. They always get more narrow to the end, and you have to draw it that way if you want it to look realistic. Of course, don't forget the trees on the edge of our drawing. They close the composition very nicely, as you can see, so that we have a darker part in left top and bottom corners, and we have a darker part in our right bottom corner, and it creates a beautiful closed composition. Now I add some grass with just some loose strokes to the left and right. I'm not trying to draw the grass, I'm just kind of moving the stick as it feels right, because this is how grass looks. It just does not grow from top to bottom. This is not some kind of suburbia picture. This is a nice landscape of a forest, and the forest is always a little bit wild. And here I decided to add more details, so I'm just popping some color here and there, some trees. And as you can see, I'm not really smudging, I'm more kind of tapping on my details, just to combine this new layer of oil pastel with the previous layer a little bit more. And here I smudge the tree, and then tap again on the tree, on the leaves. I really don't like drawing on just one part of the illustration. I always try to draw everywhere at once. And here I tapped my pastel knife on the tree, and I forgot to clean it beforehand, so a happy little accident happened here. And I really love this texture on the top corner, in the top left corner. It looks like those very, very thin leaves from the tree, so I decided to keep it. But if something like that happens to you, you can also scratch it off anytime. And now you see a speed up of me adding even more details and also working with some negative space, because it may happen that you added too much grass like I did here, but it's not a problem. Just use your gray color or whatever and add another layer. And here I had some dark spot on my water, which I did not like, so I cleaned my my palette knife. I already call it pastel knife because I use them so much with my pastels. So yeah, I cleaned my palette knife, then I added the soft tip, then I tried to do it with the fingers. Sometimes it can be really messy, but you have to be creative and find a way to eliminate your mistakes. And in the end, I realized the last thing I want to do is make my tree a little bit thicker and darker. And here I am at the moment where I have to decide, is this illustration done or not? And I know it's a big struggle for beginner artists to understand when is the picture done. I would say if you are not sure that the next thing you would add to your picture would definitely make this picture better, then you're done. Because every stroke you add should make the picture better. And if it doesn't, then you shouldn't make this stroke. And this is our final result. Let me know in the comments how you like this tutorial, if you would love to see more of such tutorials, and also if you would love me to record maybe a fuller tutorial with like an uncut version, and I'll be happy to do so. And also if you decide to draw this picture, let me see the result. I would be happy to see it. You can send it to me on Instagram. Thank you for being here, and see you in my next video. Also bye from Miso. Bye!